Here is Pastor Bill Tansey with this week's message from New Horizons Church.
Well, Frank mentioned the cicadas this morning, and they are numerous, and they're noisy, and they're taking over the southeast this summer. These are not the locusts, they are cicadas, and they are the 13-year variety. They haven't been here for 13 years. And did you know that if you walked through the woods any time during the past 13 years in a park or maybe beneath a tree in your backyard or when you went camping or on a hike, you were walking over millions, not thousands, but millions of cicada larvae that were beneath those trees who were sucking the sap out of the roots of those trees. Now, did you know that? Well, they have been, and they've been there for 13 years. And then after 13 years, the larvae, and no scientist can explain why, these larvae come out from under the ground, and they take on a new life form, and they become cicadas, and they are now being very, very noisy. Now, only the males can make a noise. Are you impressed with all the knowledge I got about cicadas? Google is incredible. Only the males can make a noise. They have these timbres on their sides that they vibrate to lure and to seduce the females. And they prove what we know. There are two sexes of cicadas, and there are two sexes of humans, no others than that. So they're calling the females, and the females will eventually lay their eggs in a branch of the tree. That branch will fall to the ground. Those larvae will dig down under the ground, and they'll stay there for another 13 years. And for these 13 years, there was something unseen that we were walking over. It's amazing. There are many things in life that are unseen. And that's the story of the cicadas and how they go unseen for 13 years. They're invisible. Well, this morning, we are going to witness how the invisible power of God is behind many, many things in our lives that we never see. The invisible hand of God is at work in our lives in ways that we don't know about. And we're reminded that sometimes spiritual activities are going on that we can't see physically. We can't experience through our five senses. Yet it's happening. God is a great God, a supreme God, a sovereign God that does those things. So we are coming to Elisha now in chapter 6 of 2 Kings. And I'm going to be reading a passage, if you'll stand with me, from beginning of verse 8 through verse 23. And it says this: Once when the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel and with his servants, saying, At such and such a place shall be my camp. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, Beware, that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are going down there. And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God told him. Then he used to warn him, so that he saved himself there more than once or twice. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing, and he called his servants and said to them, Will you not show who among us is for the king of Israel? Will you not tell us that? And that, verse 12, and one of his servants said, None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. And he said, Go and see where he is, that I may send and seize him. It was told him, Behold, he is in Dothan. So he sent their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, Alas, my master, what shall we do? He said, Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, Oh, Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened his eyes, and the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots and fire all around Elisha. And when the Syrians came down against Elisha, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, Please strike this people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, This is not the way. This is not the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he led them to Samaria. As soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha said, O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. As soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said, My father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down? He answered, You shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those whom you have taken captive, and with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. So he prepared for them a feast. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away. They went to their master, and the Syrians did not come again on raids into the land of Israel. This is the word of the Lord. Please be seated. So we're introduced to another moment of war between Syria and Israel. And if you'll recall, in this first passage that we looked at with the life of Elisha, we determined that Israel and Syria have been at war for long, long periods of time, right up until today. So this Syrian king was a man by the name of Ben-Hadad. Now, I think you'll see his picture on the screen there. This Ben-Hadad was quite a handsome fellow, you'll see from his bust there. And he was the supreme king of all Syria. He was quite a mighty military man, and he would camp his forces on the very border of Israel. And from there, he would launch these blitzkrieg type attacks against the people of God. And what he would do in the narrative we saw that he would strategize how to attack Israel, and then he would send them in to surprise the Hebrews. But he couldn't surprise them, and he was frustrated. It says that he was actually enraged because he was continually unsuccessful and he was failing to get this done. Here he was with the most supreme military equipment, with the best army in the region, perhaps on the face of the earth at this point in history, and he's sending these warriors, his very best men, into Israel, and every time they strategize this, the Israelis aren't there. They're not there. So in verse 8, he's very, very frustrated. He says, look, we mobilize our forces. He's having a military strategic meeting there. He says, we mobilize our forces at a certain place, but the Hebrews know about it and they vanish before our very eyes. What's up with that, he says. And he says, this has happened not once, but several times we failed to defeat the Hebrews. So he said, there must be a spy in our midst. Because otherwise, how would they know over there? How would they know what's going on? So this was an act of God protecting the armies of the Israelis. It was happening then. Psalm 91 says, God is our refuge and our fortress. He protects God's people from attacks, including us. And Psalm 121 says, God keeps his people from all evil. And Isaiah 43:2 said, God will be with his people when they're going through difficulties. And that's what we're seeing before our very eyes in this passage today. So here's this pagan king, Ben-Hadad, who certainly didn't know anything about God or how to deal with God, but he's soon going to learn. He's going to be taught a lesson. So at verse 12, finally one of his generals gulps and speaks up to Ben-Hadad. He says, you don't have a traitor. Here's our problem. It's due to this man named Elisha, a prophet of the Hebrew God. That's where our problem is. He says, this is not a natural act. What he is implying to Ben-Hadad is, this is a supernatural act that's going on here. Ben-Hadad didn't get it. He says, and then he says this to the king, and it took a lot of guts to say this. He said, that prophet Elisha tells their king the very words you speak in your bedroom. In other words, he knows everything about us. You know who knows everything about us is our God. We can't hide from him. We can't hide our thoughts or our motives, our passions from him. He knows all about us. After all, he formed us in our mother's womb. His fingerprints are all over us. He knows us. He loves us. He gave us life. And he says, that fella Elisha is your problem, king. Well, over this passage, if you write in your Bible, over this passage of Scripture, I wrote these words. I wrote, God is in control. Because if you look at it from a statistical analysis, the Syrians were far superior. They had far greater weaponry. They had more people. They had the best soldiers in the land, and yet they weren't winning. Why was that? Was it because the Hebrews were clever? No. It's because God is in control. So Proverbs 21:1 says this: God will change kings like he changes rivers. God's in control of everything. The world is, I have to quit saying this. We say this a lot at this church. The world has gone nutty right now. I'll think of another way to say it next week. But the world is crazy right now. There's so much conflict from so many areas, yet God is in control, and he changes all these kings the way he changes rivers. But Ben-Hadad didn't get it. So what does he do? He issues his order. He said, go into the darkness of night, seize him, and bring that character to me. I want to see this Elisha fella. That wasn't a good idea. Of all Ben-Hadad's ideas, that might have been his worst one. So in verse 14, what happens is he sends out his troops under a strong contingent, and I'm sure these would have been his royal troops, his very best ones, under the darkness of night, so that they would encircle the town where Elisha was, a town called Dothan. And from there, they will seize Elisha, that was the plan at least, and bring him back to Ben-Hadad. I think it's almost amusing. He went under the cover of darkness, think that God couldn't see him. It was his idea that maybe if we go in dark, this man will lose his supernatural power, as if God would miss them. And then secondly, he said, we'll use the element of surprise. You can't surprise God. You can't surprise him. You can't hide from him. He's always there. And all this strategic military planning reveals one thing about Ben-Hadad. As brilliant as he must have been, he was a man of zero faith. He didn't know God. He's going to learn who God is. You see, he wasn't convinced that this Yahweh, this Jehovah that the Hebrews worshiped was such a great God that he's greater than his troops. Well, let me give you an illustration. The 1967 war that Israel fought, they were 19 years old, the new state of Israel, is referred to by many military historians as the miraculous war. Israel shouldn't have won the war. They took on multiple countries that had them surrounded, and they defeated the forces of Egypt, of Syria, and Jordan, and all the other ones. In about 30 minutes, they wiped out the entire air force of Egypt. It's an incredible thing. The people who teach this in military colleges today still refer to the miracles that happened there. Because if you stack up what happened in 1967, it shouldn't have happened. They won the Golan Heights from Syria. They won the Sinai from Egypt. And then they won back the city of David, Jerusalem's old city. And what did a rabbi do? He went to the Western Wall and he blew the shofar of victory. And it shouldn't have happened. They were a tiny little sliver of land with a tiny army and air force and very few tanks that did what they did. Well, it was mathematically impossible. And experts are still scratching their head about how it happened. I believe it was because God ordained that. God commissioned that. God decided that. And the point of all this is this: God protects his own. He protects us in this church. He protects you every week. When you need him most, he's there for you. He's always alert. He's always awake. He's always wanting to hear your voice. So in this passage, here we see Syria's best soldiers in a fool's parade. They're going to go over there. They're going to see that Elisha guy. This shouldn't be a hard job, they're saying to each other. And then in verse 15, Elisha's servant gets up. Dawn has approached Dothan, and he steps out of the cabin, and what he sees makes his knees knock, his mouth go dry, his jaw drop. He saw these Syrian soldiers in their chariots with all their armor surrounding the entire town, the entire city of Dothan. He ran back into the cabin and says, "Oh, my Lord, Elisha, what will we do? What shall we do? How can we handle this?" Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt that mathematically the odds are stacked against you? Have you ever felt like one trouble has come after another and you just ask yourself, how can I get through this? Well, that's what the servant is asking Elisha. Because when he saw all those horses and all those chariots and all those swords and all that great army, he was naturally afraid. You and I might have been too. He knew and thought in his heart, there's no chance we can defeat these fellows. But here's what Elisha says to him. If you remember nothing else about this passage, remember this. He said, don't fear. Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Now, had I been that assistant to Elisha, I would have said, you're talking about the two of us here. We're greater than them. No, those that are with us are greater than they. Amir Safadi is a wonderful Messianic Jew who writes wonderful books. I'm reading his book on Daniel, and he says this when things were happening in the book of Daniel that they couldn't see. He says, they think they know reality, but there's so much more to this world than what their five senses can pick up. And that's what this messenger is going to learn when he goes back to explain all this to Elisha. So Elisha then prayed that God would do something, not change the situation. He prayed that that the servant could actually see the power of God with his own eyes. And he said, allow him, dear Lord, to see who's with us in this matter. He needed to see this. It says, then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. He saw something absolutely remarkable. I would love to have seen it. He saw Elisha's prayer answered, and when a person is blind to spiritual reality, only God can open their eyes, and that's what God does with this assistant. And what seemed unbelievable to the servant is what he saw on the hillside surrounding Dothan, behind the Syrian troops, surrounding the Syrian troops. He saw God's army shining in the morning sun in an incredible way as if it was on fire. So he no longer had to ask Elisha who's for us because God revealed it to his very eyes. So when his eyes were open, no longer did the Syrian army look so great. No longer was he fearful because he saw the power of God. That's what God does in our lives, congregation. He allows us to face those uphill battles in ways that you and I can't imagine. And many of you are going through some uphill battles now. And we're praying for a lot of folks on our prayer list that Jan and Frank sent out that are going through some uphill battles. And God is absolutely able to get us through those. So what he was seeing there, shining brilliantly, were the fiery agents of God. By the way, on another occasion, that happened at the cross. There were 75,000 unseen angels, hands on swords, ready to save Jesus from the cross. Matthew 26:53 describes it. It says that the angels were standing on the precipice of heaven, ready to go to the aid of our Savior, awaiting the order from God. But the order never came. Listen to how Jesus described it. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But that didn't happen. Why? Because of the love of Christ prevailed. He wasn't a victim of that cross. He did that willingly for us. So here's these angels who were powerful and prepared, but Jesus chose love rather than battling his enemies that day. Well, how about us? Psalm 91:11. Listen to these words. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in your ways. Psalm 34:7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and the angel delivers him or her. Well, now the servant's fear has changed. It's changed from amazement from fear rather to amazement, because at this moment he sees this God that Elisha serves is so real that he'll do supernatural things to save us from our enemies. And so when you face problems that may seem insurmountable, call on God. Ask him to be there for you. Feel his touch. I often tell people, just open the Psalms and read them aloud. If you're going through a difficult moment in your life, just read the Psalms aloud. There's something about God hearing your words of praise to him that is just absolutely supernatural. So remember this also. There are spiritual resources that you and I have available that we can't even see. Look through the eyes of faith. Well, the Syrian army didn't see these chariots of fire. Only two saw them, Elisha and his assistant. And then Elisha prays for the second time in the passage. There they are facing the Syrians, and he says, "Oh Lord, make them blind." strike them blind. Now, I don't believe it was physical blindness. I think he was praying that God would make them blind to their circumstances. In other words, just strike them plumb dumb, just so that they can't understand what's going on here, because they're going to follow him. They see him, he's going to guide them. So he goes out to them. Here he is. Here's little old Elisha facing the Syrian army. He says, you fellows have come the wrong way. Let me guide you. Let me show you where you go. You're in the wrong city. And they went right along with it. That's a miracle of God there going on. Not unlike on occasion in the 67 war, the Hebrews gave the tank commanders of Jordan orders in Jordan, in the Jordanian language, perfectly, and guided them to dead ends. So here he says to them, he says, you've come the wrong way. This is the wrong city. And then what did he do? He said, follow me and I'll take you where you want to go. And they said, okay. They all followed in line like a bunch of toy soldiers. So they're following Elisha now to where he's taking them. And guess where he takes them? He takes them to the stronghold of the Hebrews at Samaria before the king himself. When he gets them there, he prays again. He said, oh, Lord, open their eyes now. And when their eyes come open, when they come back to their senses, they realize they're absolutely surrounded by the Hebrews. Suddenly, they're not flexing their muscles. They're not feeling the power that from Ben-Hadad. They're seeing the power of God at work. And what does the king do? The king of Israel, who wasn't a very bright guy. Twice he says, let's kill him. Shall we kill him, Elisha? Let's just slaughter him right here on the spot. He said, no, we don't do that. That's not how we treat our prisoners. Elisha said, we don't do it that way. He said, we don't do it the way Hamas does it. He said, we just don't do it that way. And the king is witnessing this spectacle, and Elisha says to them, he said, put bread and water in front of them. Give them a nice feast. Give them a good meal and send them on their way. We don't answer evil with good. And that's a good principle for us. Precept of the Bible throughout the 66 books of the Bible is, one of the precepts is, don't return good for evil or evil for good. He said, always return good even after evil. So they gave them food and drink. They set a meal for them. And then he said, okay, boys, off you go. And they just obeyed Elisha like so many little mice, and they went back to Syria. And it says in the passage, a little footnote, it said the Syrians didn't attack them anymore. I think Ben-Hadad must have said, okay, I give up. I understand. Their God is greater than any power that we have here, and all this advanced weaponry that we have. It's just absolutely no match for the God of the Hebrews. Well, let me add this to you this morning. Most of us are going to live and die and never see an angel. We're going to live and die and never see with our naked eyes those invisible forces that surround believers of God. But on occasion it does happen. Billy Graham told a wonderful story about an Irish missionary that was serving in the Pacific Islands. You might have heard this story. Graham spoke to the missionary and believed it to be true. When they arrived in the Pacific Islands, he and his family, the natives hated their guts because they spoke in the name of Jesus. And the leader of the tribe, the chief of the tribe, said, go over and murder them. Murder that missionary family. Keep them from sharing this name, Jesus. So this mob that he sent over, intent on killing them, surrounded their little house. And what did the missionary family do? They prayed all night. Dear God, protect us from this mob of killers. Well, as dawn came, the mob took off. They skedaddled. They didn't attack them all night long. And the leader of the mob later became a Christian. And this missionary talked to him on one occasion. He said, I have to ask you a question. Why didn't you attack us and kill us that night? What happened that night? Why didn't you just come in and kill us the way you said you were going to? And the chief said, he answered his question with the question. He said, who were all those men you had guarding your house with hands on swords? Who were those men? And the missionary said, well, I didn't have anyone guarding my house. He said, oh, yes, you did. He said, we saw them. We saw them. They had swords that were drawn, and they pushed us away from the house. They surrounded the house, and they surrounded us. And we knew there was no way we could go in and attack you and your family. Well, those were most likely the angels of God who are protecting those missionaries. Does that happen every day? No. Do people see that sort of thing every day? No. But God still on occasion reveals that kind of miraculous revelation of the power of God. So what do we learn from this passage this morning? Well, we learn this. God is sovereign, and his power is greater than all the nations on earth. All the kings, all the presidents, all the prime ministers, his power is greater. And despite the king of Syria's military might and strategy, God took this little man Elisha and utilized him as a vessel to thwart the enemy's plans. He did that through the power that he bestowed upon this anointed prophet of God. So what does this underscore for us? It underscores the importance of faith and obedience to God when we're going through those tough times, and we all will. I tell you, I've read every verse of this Bible many times, and there's not one verse that says we're not going to go through some tough times in our lives. We're not going to go through some challenges. We're not going to go through some dark moments. There's not one verse that says that, but there are many verses that say, rely on God, fall back into his arms, and he'll get you through it. And that's what he does. So the idea of this passage is this. There's no human scheme, there's no military might that can prevail against the divine will and the protection of God. It just isn't going to happen. He's great. That's the God we serve at this church. It's a God our missionaries serve throughout the Kanawha Valley and around the world, that same God who loves us. Let's look at the heart of the matter this morning. Number one, when you can't see the outcome, trust in God's provision. He doesn't give us 20/20 vision into the future. All he says is, trust in me, lean on me. I'm your rear guard. I am your right arm that will get you through all this. Number two, pray to have open eyes to spiritual realities. I didn't know until this week that I was walking on all those little stinky larvae of those cicadas, but they were there, millions of them. Number three, remember, faith in the unseen things of God is greater than any threats from the world. Greater is he that is in us than he that's in the world. That's who he is, and that's who we are. And aren't you glad this morning we're serving him, and we're able to get through all these technical problems this morning?
This has been the Sunday service from New Horizons Church, D Street in South Charleston. For your spiritual needs, our email, newhorizonschurch2021@gmail.com. Join us again next Sunday at 10:30 with Pastor Bill Tansey from New Horizons Church.